All right, we're live, so we're gonna wait a little bit. I'm gonna go to my page and share this out before we get started. My page and share this out.
How about I do this? There we go.
Got me on your phone.
All right, it is shared on my page as well.
Share online. All right, we are live and ready to go. Welcome, everyone. It's your girl, Morgan A. Owens, one of your many phenomenal hosts of the Influencers powered by the Cincinnati Herald. First and foremost, I want to say that the Herald does not endorse candidates, but this is my show. And so this is my opinion, my special guest, Judge Fanon Rucker, and I'm super excited to have him on the platform. So make sure if you guys have any questions, any comments, please drop them. Please behave yourselves because I will call you out. This is my show, so play nice. And I just want to welcome Judge to my to my show. So good morning.
Good morning, Morgan. How are you? It's so good to be with you this beautiful Saturday morning.
Yes, I am great. So for everyone who is watching that may not know you, there might be some people out there that may not know who you are. Can you please just introduce yourself and just give a quick rundown of all that you do?
Oh my goodness. Well, to all those who are watching, and I've shared it on my page as well, so hopefully we'll have a few folks signing on. My name is Fanon Rucker. I was born and raised in Gary, Indiana, attended Hampton University down on the ocean front in Southern Virginia. Came here for law school after I experienced what all of us did in a huge injustice across our country. Came here for law school, was a prosecutor, and I went into private practice as a civil rights attorney, practicing police misconduct and housing discrimination, employment discrimination. I became the law director for a municipality, writing their laws and representing public officials. And then in 2007, I was elevated to the bench as a judge, where I sat from 2007 until last year, where I retired. And so I'm now a lawyer with the Cochran firm. But when I was appointed to the judge, I was 35 years old and the youngest judge in the state of Ohio. So I was blessed to have that opportunity. But I preside over several 100,000 cases in that role, wrote more decisions than anybody else, and helped to explain and to make our system more transparent. That's really my objective, and has been in public and private practice over these years.
Great, that is a lot. So, what made you want to run now for prosecutor? You accomplished all these things, you had a great, stint in, being a judge. Personally, side note, I wanted to be a judge when, I was in high school, college. I thought that was just the bossiest thing that you could do, right? So why would you give that up to, be a prosecutor?
Sure. Well, first, let me say that, as many people may know, this is a rematch from 16 years ago. During that time, Mike Allen, who was the prosecutor, was in some stuff. And so I stepped in to run, and Dieters came back to run as well. He was the state treasurer, had been the prosecutor previously, and we ran in that race. In the 16 years following, obviously, I've been a judge, I've been a professor, I've done a whole lot of other stuff. But the consistency of what I do, and the reason I went to law school, is all about how we make our system more just, how we make it more responsive and reflective of our constitutional principles. So what we have currently is a system where all of us acknowledge these disparities and these issues and these problems, but we don't have the intentional, purposeful directives or actions to address those initiatives. And so what I've been doing is building up these relationships and working on issues statewide. Being a prosecutor, or the prosecutor, helps to expand the reach to address these disparities that are actually existing. Now, I will tell you that I get the question quite a bit. Why would you go from being a judge to a prosecutor? It seems like a step down. Well, the way that I explain that, as a judge, I had about 50 cases a day, 5 days a week. Mm-hmm. And in handling those cases, I could guarantee in my courtroom that everyone in there received that measure of justice that we expect, that we know that we're entitled to. Mm-hmm. Because I demanded it of the prosecutors and the defense lawyers. I demanded it of my courtroom staff. Right. Well, as the prosecutor, I will then set the policy for how cases are handled and advocated for across the board, from juvenile court to common pleas to how cases are presented to grand jury. So it's not a limiting or a reduction in my responsibilities. It's actually an expansion of the ability to provide that justice that the system is supposed to be based on to everybody.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So you are on The Influencer. So it is a group of millennials. And so, that's all fine and great, but we want to know you. We want to know you as a person, right? Because millennials, we like to know people. So I'm going to hit you with some out the box questions. Nothing too scary. Nothing too scary. So Skyline or Gold Star?
I'd just say Skyline.
Okay. What's your favorite color?
Black.
Black and gold.
Well, I mean, the base is black, but of course, gold laid on top of it. Old gold, particularly.
What if we were to grab your playlist right now? What songs are on your current playlist?
Well, I like to dance, so you'd hear some Music Soul Child on my playlist. I'm also a hip hop head. I'm an old school hip hop head, so there's Jay-Z and there's definitely Biggie in there as well.
Okay. If you could travel to one place right now, where would it be?
Back in time? Is that an option? Oh, you mean someplace like a real, like hop on a plane and go somewhere?
Yeah, like hop on a plane.
It would probably be to Egypt. I love history, and that place has a lot of sentimental value to my personal life. Okay,
if you could sit down and have coffee with one person who's living right now and one person who is not, who would those two people be?
A living person would probably be probably Kamala Harris.
Okay.
And there's one person who's not living. I read a book about him, but they call his name Jesus.
Okay.
I would love to have a conversation and hear something more about how he came up with his sermons, although I don't speak Hebrew, so I don't know how the conversation would go.
Well, I'm sure he speaks all languages. So he is he is that great. All right. So, being a millennial and I'm considered an older millennial, but I know there's many, I don't even know what the generation is like behind me, like Z, X, I don't know. Why is it so important for us to really get involved in politics, get involved in the voting process, get involved in all that? So what would you say? How do we even start if someone was interested in getting
All right. So first, let me talk about the imports or the power of engagement. Yeah. When we look through history, and I like I said, I've been a professor, I teach, I love history. I love particularly American history and Black, I love it. And so what we know through history is that the successful movements that we've had in this country, particularly social justice movements, have been fueled by, have been energized by, and usually have been led by what we would consider that age of millennials, those 20-somethings, those early 30-somethings, with some information and support from older folks. But it's always been those in those age groups that have fueled the civil rights movement, that fueled the women's suffrage movement, that fueled the successful movements that we've had, have been the energized younger folks. So now I ain't that far from y'all. I'm in my 40s still for a couple more years, but that's the first thing. So that's a need to recognize the power of that age group when it comes to impacting our country's direction. That's the first thing. Second of all, when it comes specifically to millennials being involved in voting, my goodness, if what has happened this year does not encourage or does not convince any naysayers that it matters who is in leadership positions, then I don't know what can. What happened? Hundreds of thousands of folks hit the streets in May and June. hundreds of thousands all over the country. And they were speaking with a voice of solidarity, all ages, all races, all socioeconomic classes, saying, you know what, we want better. We want more than we have right now. We need some changes. And if you look, changes happen. On city councils, they actually pass laws that change their police community relationships. People in Congress drafted laws that addressed no-knock warrants and how we handled police citizen contacts and oversight. I mean, governors came out saying, okay, these are the initiatives we need. So it matters who's in, and what matters is the fact that they are held accountable by those who give them the power of their vote. So millennials having that energy and having that insight and being first line on a lot of things that happen absolutely need to be part of those who are deciding who's in those policy positions so they can call them up when there's something that happens and ensure that they're actually being responsive to what's being requested.
Right. Yeah, I always get upset when I hear people post about, well, what's the whole point in voting? You know, my vote doesn't matter. Well, if it doesn't matter, why not vote anyway? You know what I mean? Like, why not go get your free sticker if you know, you could care less about it. I think also there is a lack of education of the voting process, like how it works. You know, what do you think about that? Because I mean, I was fortunate enough to go to a private school where we got taught the whole process, but I don't think a lot of people really know, you know, about the popular vote versus, you know, other type of, you know, votes. So can you, you know, explain a little bit about that?
Sure, but particularly when we talk about presidential elections, and I will say that we used to have civics classes, and you know, trying to streamline what we learn and how we learn it, we got rid of a lot of stuff that was practical knowledge and more focused on technical knowledge when we got to school. And so practical knowledge was that understanding of how our government practically worked, how to practically go and find out who's running and the type of stuff that they're pushing forward, and how we support or oppose them, or toss people out on their behinds if they're not being responsible, or find people and support them and encourage them to run for office because we know them and have a connection to them. That stuff isn't taught anymore. But when we talk about popular vote versus electoral votes and how people are elected, that's specifically about the presidential race. And, you know, the concept was at some point, we don't want folks in certain areas to decide every presidential election. So think of it this way. Because of the Electoral College, all of the states and all votes have the potential for impacting a larger election. If we said we're going to do this totally on popular vote, what would happen? New York and California would pretty much decide every election, which means that the presidential candidates would only spend their time addressing the interests of the 5 largest states. And that would leave out the other, 45? So that's why there's an electoral college. What happens is there are 540, I forgot how many the number is, but there's a certain number of electoral votes and congresspersons that represents the total number of electoral votes. Each state has a number of electoral votes based on their population. California and New York have the most, and then like Maine and Oregon and Montana probably have the smallest. But they all add up to that 544 number. And so when presidential candidates are barnstorming the country, they're looking for those states that are going to help them get to that majority number by adding up, okay, I can get Montana and add Montana to Florida. And then if I can get Ohio, that's 25 over there and 22. And then that 3, and then I can go get Texas and I can not worry about it. But I mean, that's how you get to that number. And whoever in the majority of votes in that state goes to that presidential candidate, that's who that state's electoral votes go to. I mean, that's how it works. So even though people say, well, my vote doesn't matter because if everybody else in my state votes for the other person, then my vote washes. Well, it doesn't, because you're getting up to that total. And the other issue is the local races are probably much more important than the presidential race to us as individuals. I used to tell people, you know, they say, I'm going to vote for president and that's it. Well, hold on. Have you ever met the president? Have you ever met a vice president? Have you ever been in a room where you're able to talk to that person and influence them? No, but I can guarantee you, you're probably going to meet a council member. You're probably going to know who the mayor is. You're probably going to meet a judge. I know a whole lot of people that met a judge personally off the bench. Those are the ones who impact your lives daily, not the president. So that's my position on that.
Oh, thank you for the quick lesson. I'm going to see if we have any questions or comments right now. For everyone who's tuning in, you are watching The Influencers powered by the Cincinnati Herald. The Cincinnati Herald does not endorse candidates, but this is my show. So this is my special guest with my own opinions. Had to put that little asterisk on there. Let me see. If you guys have any questions, make sure that you drop them while you have him here up close and virtual personal. So I know that you've been down at the Board of Elections, basically every day?
Just about.
So how have you compared the last election to this one with people coming and early voting? Are there more people that are coming? Like, what's going on down there?
Oh my goodness, are there more people voting? And first of all, let me just offer, it's Saturday morning, it's 11 o'clock. I don't usually put on a suit and tie, but one, I knew I was coming on with Ms. Morgan and I wanted to be dressed up. And second, I just came from an event where I was compelled to wear this as part of my outfit. So I just want to offer that as a reason.
All right. It's all right.
With regard to the Board of Election, I have to be honest with you, it has been absolutely mind-blowing, the number of people that have been showing up every day. Now, just in comparison, we started early voting in Ohio in 2008. That was the first year that President Obama was elected. And that year, I believe there was something like 700 plus folks who showed up on the first day of early voting. 2008, 2012, 2016, presidential years, because that's the best measure of the voting turnout, because other years, it just doesn't compare. In 2016, we set the record for early vote turnout. First day, 920, 930 people. That's the record from 2016. On the first day of voting this year, 3,000 people showed up on the first day of early voting. So tripling the first day early vote record from 4 years ago. Well, that hasn't eased up. Every single day has seen record and record and record turnout, including yesterday, Friday, 3,000 people again. This is almost 2 weeks into voting, 10 days in. And my goodness, we're still seeing early vote totals that are quadrupling the early vote totals that were records in prior years. And the energy is electric. People are waving their blue ballots and they're yelling and they're fired up.
It's elections down there.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that's not just the candidates. That's the folks standing in line to go.
Yeah. So what's the demographic that you're seeing? Are there more minorities voting? Are there more, who's voting more? More younger people, older people?
You know what? It truly is a cross section. I see younger folks showing up. I see folks showing up in walkers. I see a lot of minority voters, and specifically a lot of Black folks coming down there to vote.
Okay.
Now, what we're able to do is track, because of technology, what neighborhoods are showing up to vote. We can't see what people are voting, but we are able to see the neighborhoods and the areas where they're coming from to vote. And we can see where they're not. And, between now and election day, we'll be pretty deliberate about ensuring that those places that are not coming out in significant numbers, we're going to be showing up in those places and reaching out to them individually by text and calls to ensure that all those folks who are registered get out there and participate, so we have a good high percentage number of voters that show up.
Who ain't coming out? Call them out. What neighborhood?
I don't know yet.
Oh, you don't know yet. Well, y'all better go out and vote. I haven't voted yet, but I will,
Who are you? Where's the mayor? Where's the mayor? Talking about y'all better come out and vote.
I'm getting there. I still got time.
You have time.
I'm a traditionalist. I like to vote on the day of voting. I don't know, but I will be down there. You will see my face to vote. I've always voted. I've never not missed voting, which leads me to my next question. So I know there's like a whole bunch of talk about mailing in ballots. Some people don't have to go vote in person. Like, what's up with that whole situation? Like, why are people only getting ballots in the mail and why some people aren't?
So what we have in Ohio, and every state has different rules, but in Ohio, what we have is in-person, absentee, and mail-in.
Okay. That's
the different ways that people can vote. Now, the mail-in is just that. People request a mail-in ballot, they get a stamp, and they mail it back. Don't have to go anywhere near the Board of Election.
Okay.
Absentee is where they either show up, they request their absentee ballot, and then they drop it off by driving to the Board of Election and drop it in a box. There was this big issue and this big dust up that they've been talking about where there's only one. I mean, we have a county of 800,000 people that sprawls out 30 or 40 miles. And there's only one place in the whole county that you can drop your ballot off. And that, you know, people are not real happy about that, even though you got a whole month to do it. I don't know why people are upset. You got a whole month to get there. But anyway, so there's only one place that folks can drive to in order to drop off that ballot, and that's absentee vote. They can go and drop it there. Or they can go and stand in line for 15 minutes or 10 minutes or however short the line goes, and they can vote in person.
Okay.
Those are the three ways that people can exercise that right to vote.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that up and giving me a little lesson on that. So I don't have any questions, but a lot of people are showing you love. Kenneth Gilbert says he absolutely loves Mr. Rucker. Carl Washington says, bring the ruckus, brother. Tang Array says, my two favorites. Shawnee's tuning in. A lot of people are tuning in, so that's awesome. So if you guys have any questions.
Well, I do see a couple of questions.
Oh, you on your page?
I guess so. I thought this was coming through on the main page. So one is from a Tamiko Ware Malden.
Hey, Tamiko.
Who says, once you are elected as prosecutor, what does the first 30 days look like for you? That's an interesting question. I guess gets into some of my platform stuff. I'll just say that as an initial matter, once I'm elected, and I talk about this a little bit, I'll be the first Black man in the history of the state to be elected county prosecutor. I mean, 88 counties, 240 years. And so because of this election and because of this run, I've made contacts and relationships with some prosecutors and some national figures across the country. And so once I'm in that position, I will be on a pretty large national platform of a small group of folks with that authority and with that influence. And so the first 30 days, I am certain, will include a lot of national engagement and attention. But with regard to the office, day one, our office will implement certain initiatives that will change how our system interacts with the community. Bail reform will be our policy change on day one, which will reduce our jail population and also reduce our homicide and violent crime rates. On day one, we'll begin implementing or creating our conviction integrity unit, which will ensure that innocent people aren't sitting in prison for crime they didn't commit. On day one, and I've already started some of these things, I've already been working with the chief of police to work on initiatives to specifically lower our violent crime rates in the city. On day one, I mean, these are all things that are essential today. And so that's why I've been working on them, so that on the first day, we will already be in motion for these things moving. On day one, I'll have the policy in place to change how we use asset forfeiture funds to the benefit of the communities. On day one, I'll be working with our prosecutors in the office to ensure that they all watch 13th so that they can understand the power that they wield. I'm telling everybody watching this, if you have not stopped and looked at Ava DuVernay's documentary 13th that talks about the development of our criminal justice system and how it has impacted certain communities, I implore you, go to Netflix and watch it today. Certainly those who are in the system need to understand the power that they wield. And so day one, my prosecutors will all watch that. So day one, folks are gonna see some significant differences and changes to how that office operates, how leadership actually works, and the functioning of the system to the benefit of all of the county.
Okay, great. Let's see, we have some questions rolling in.
Darnell, I see Darnell has a question.
Oh, about the Michael Jackson. Hold on. We got some other ones. Hold on. Kenneth wants to know, what is the biggest change you plan to make as a prosecutor outside of being Black, and how does it correlate to neighborhoods like Lincoln Heights?
Yeah, well, as I just explained, a lot of these issues, particularly with bail reform, it's a foundational understanding that no one should be sitting in jail simply because they cannot afford not to be there. I mean, that's pretty basic. And I would suggest that there's no one whose logical thinking would say otherwise. But the question then becomes, well, what are we doing affirmatively to ensure that's actually not the case? So that's why I'm talking about amending our policy so that we're giving attention and helping to address that, while at the same time lowering our jail populations and increasing the safety of the community by focusing those jail spaces on those who are assessed as causing a risk of harm to the community. That's what New Jersey did in a bipartisan way. And they lowered their jail population by 35%, and they lowered their homicide rate by 40%, and their violent crime rate by 33%. And it did not change the number of people that were coming back to have their cases heard. It didn't add any funds. I mean, it actually changed how the system operated. So that's probably one of the biggest changes. But again, there are so many initiatives that we're going to be implementing, as I've discussed, with asset forfeiture funds, with reentry court, helping to reduce recidivism and reduce our violent crime rate, with actually addressing, oh goodness, I was just talking about the conviction integrity units. Those are all equally important and equally impactful, but all of them have the underlying objective of ensuring trust or helping to build trust between the community and the system, because those working parts working together is what helps us to have safer neighborhoods and more cohesive communities. It's what actually helps us to cooperate to remove those elements from the community that are risk causing harm. I grew up in the worst of the worst, and I know what it is to live in communities where you're afraid to go home or afraid to come out. And I know no one wants to live like that. So we need to be serious about building those relationships with police and with the community to ensure that we can actually have those communities that we desire. Now, I heard a question specifically about how that will impact Lincoln Heights. My thing is, when we apply the principles of justice broadly, it lifts everybody on the same level. So it's not that it helps a particular community, it brings all communities to the same level, so that in Mariemounts, they feel secure and they feel safe because of whatever relationship they have. Well, fine, Lincoln Heights will be on the same level because they'll understand that their fairness is across the board. It's not about me being Black. That's a fact of my running. It's not a qualification, nor is it an objective of the race. It's the truth about my running and me being in this position. But the truth also is that my entire career has been about how we build a just system, working on policies statewide and locally. And that's what I'll be applying continuously as a prosecutor, the same as I did in private practice and as a judge for 13 years.
Okay. Here is another kind of hot question. So Carl asks, let's see, are you in position to get people released who have marijuana charges? And the same thing that Carl asked, with cannabis being decriminalized and legally medical, what's your stance on legalizing it for recreational purposes?
So when the issue of recreational use came on the ballot a couple of years ago, a lot of my colleagues as judges were afraid to make their positions known. There was a song in 1992 by some guy named Keith Murray. And I think part of the reprise was legalize and I'll advertise. Now, I'm not going to advertise, but I am one who believes that when we have 37 states that have made it legal recreationally and medicinally, what we have in the state of Ohio medicinal, there are people apparently who are still incarcerated for having trafficked in some amounts of marijuana, yet there are people who are making money in other states for trafficking marijuana. So I'm one who has believed since these conversations have started that marijuana, with its medicinal import and with the wave of legalization around the country, that's not something that our state needs to focus our law enforcement efforts. It should not be illegal. It should be legalized, in my opinion. And if it is, then there should also be legally a review of anyone who's in prison on marijuana charges, particularly trafficking, because if it's legal, then deemed that their conduct was also not wrongful. So yeah, that's my position on that.
Okay. Carl also asked, is it possible to get people to police communities they grew up in or understand?
Just ask that question again.
Okay. Is it possible to get people to police communities they grew up in or understand? So I guess, Carl, are you asking like for police? So if a police officer grew up in Avondale, and he applies for, for a position, let him police in Avondale because he knows the community, he understands the culture. How do you feel about that? I guess he's having an issue with police that aren't familiar with our culture, our neighborhoods, and,
So, one of the things that we've been talking about across the past several months and really across the country is about police reforms. Having worked in 2001 after disturbances here, I worked on different initiatives to help bridge those relationships. I was part of the effort that brought community-oriented policing, and there has been in Hamilton County, particularly in the city of Cincinnati. Let me say that in the city of Cincinnati, there have been some very successful efforts over the years to build better relationships between the community and the police. And so this is not something that these are not campaign issues. These are like everyday real life things. I have several suggestions about police reform that I support, that I think would be good things to help bridge those relationships. And one of those is about what this person asked about. Look, let me first of all say that there's no secret that our communities have some resistance or certainly mistrust when it comes to law enforcement as a whole, and individual law enforcement officers. There's no secret about that. And my position on that is, that's why community-oriented policing is important, that people get out of their police cars and they actually personally engage with citizens. If you look at the police killings of unarmed people across the country, you can't find 3 in the past 15 years where the officer and the person who was killed knew each other. Mm-hmm. These were individuals who did not know each other interacting out of fear on most cases. Mm-hmm. And so the more relationships, deliberate relationships that people establish with the folks who are patrolling the neighborhoods, the better. Mm-hmm. I also have always been kind of critical of people who say, I hate the police, I ain't messing with the police, and I ain't messing, I ain't got nothing to do with them. Well, that's never going to bridge any gaps. What we need to do in those instances is to say, you know what, we got problems, there's tension, so we need to raise up our children to have a desire and a goal of being part of those law enforcement agencies and to be prosecutors and to be, whatever it is that we have a problem with, so that they can help to adjust it from the inside and give different perspectives to what the existence or what the problems are that currently exist. So yes, I'm encouraging of us recruiting from our neighborhoods, but I'm also not saying we should exclude folks who didn't grow up. Now, what I will say is I don't think that folks who are officers who have a demonstrated problem in certain communities ought to be elevated to higher supervisory positions. I think that there should be some real deliberate actions about who we elevate to sergeant and lieutenant to ensure that those who move those positions have a demonstrated history, building up and working with the communities that they're policing. And if they don't, then they shouldn't be put in those higher positions. So that's a long answer for that question.
No, thank you. Questions are popping now, but y'all, the show, we have to wrap it up soon. So I'm going to take one last question. And of course, you can rewatch this episode on the Herald, and also it'll be on our YouTube channel. So if Judge Rucker has time, he can go back through the questions and respond to you personally. So Shawnee wants to know, are there plans in order to have a successful rehabilitation program that helps those incarcerated once they're exonerated from marijuana convictions?
I'm not, okay.
Let me read it again.
That's a lot of hypotheticals, because marijuana is still illegal. So to ask about rehabilitation from those who were freed from marijuana, I'm not aware of any, because marijuana is still illegal. So I'm not aware of any rehabilitative programs. And I will say that we have in Hamilton County, and was actually started under Governor Kasich, is a reentry program. And a reentry program is a clearinghouse of resources for those who are returning citizens. And it gives information for housing and for mental health services and medical services. I mean, just a broad base of support services. And so my initiative is to use the reentry services, the reentry program, and then add to that a judicial component and law enforcement component, and then create a reentry court. Because we know that those who are returning citizens, about 93% of people do not have life sentences or death sentences, are returning. And our hope is that they're successful as returning citizens. But we have to make sure that they recognize that there's a support network in place for them and that there's consequences if they don't take advantage of those support networks. So that's what I'm going to do, because we do have services available. The problem is with like a lot of things, we have stuff available. We have programs out there to help people, and this is in a lot of areas, but people aren't aware of them. And we got to be better about communicating to the population about what resources are out there to give them assistance.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So guys, we're going to wrap up this episode of The Influencers. Again, the Herald does not endorse candidates. This is my own personal opinion on my show. And Judge Rucker, how can people follow you? How can they support you? Where can they find you online and not online?
All right. Well, Morgan, I want to express my appreciation to you for having me on this morning and having a quick conversation. I do see a couple of comments and questions I'll go back and address later. I am on Facebook. I have a personal page, of course, I'm full on that one, but people can go to my Facebook Rucker for Prosecutor page, find out all the events. You can see my deep dive videos about the initiatives. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitter. And, we have a very extensive email chain of a few thousand people that we send out information to. If you want to get signed up on there, go to fanonrucker.com. That's fanonrucker.com. 1 N, O-N, not 2 N's, fanonrucker.com. Would love to have your assistance. We got 2 weeks before we make history, and would love to have your advocacy more than anything.
Great. Yeah, someone asked if you could drop those resources. So maybe on your page or on your website, you could direct people to those resources that need to be known more of.
Okay.
So thank you so much for joining me this morning. We had a great conversation. There's a lot of shares. So thank you all for tuning in for The Influencers. That happens every Saturday at 11 and 6. So later on, one of my co-hosts, Naila, will be hosting at 6 p.m. tonight. As always, you can watch the replays on the Herald Facebook page. So make sure you're following. Make sure you subscribe to the Cincinnati Herald newspaper. It is the longest Black-owned newspaper. I want to say one of them in the country. So please make sure you support. This is the news that you can't get anywhere else. So thank you, Judge Fanon Rucker, and I wish you much success and hope to celebrate with you November 3rd, right?
That's right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye, guys.